Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
Welcome to the GSMC Football Podcast on the GSMC Podcast Network. I am co-hosting here once again like we do every Tuesday. Record this on Mondays. Comes out on Tuesday. This is me and Brice. Brice, how are you doing on this Monday as we record this? How are you doing?
I'm doing good, Ethan. I'm just, still out here taking it a day at a time, making it through it, just trying to do what I do best, which is just be a wholesome individual. And how about you, Ethan? Are you good?
Yeah, man. I'm chilling, trying to keep my head on straight. I'm not really don't need a haircut as many Georgians are trying.
At least one out of two of us don't.
Well, I mean, I would like one, but I'm not going. I'm not going out there.
Yeah, I'm not gonna go either. I'm just gonna stay. I'm gonna stay quote unquote ugly for the next few weeks.
Oh man, we'll just have maybe some months. I'm not going. Apparently, they just decided to start giving limited opening dine-in options for restaurants. Movie theaters are back operational. It's getting hot. I'll tell you what. Don't know how this one's gonna blow over, but
definitely.
Let me tell you, we got some good conversational pieces coming out in these segments here, all about the draft. For the most part, we're all just going to be talking about the draft. So without any further letdowns or further ados, we probably should get to how we initially thought of the draft, because it was very much up in the air of how the process was going to be done, or how exactly the drafting was going to be done. The production-wise, how did you feel about Roger Goodell being in that weird house, that weird room in his house, if it's his house, with all those screaming 10-panel fans while he goes for the draft pick and then booing him and all this stuff? It felt very weird to me, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like they said, he was going to be doing it from his basement. I'm assuming if that is his basement, that's a very nice looking basement. And, I think with the fans and everything, they were just doing the best they could to still replicate what would actually have happened if they actually had it, because he would be getting booed. But fans would also cheer for picks. And, I think like I said, they're just doing what they could with what they had available to them. I'm sure I wonder how he felt, because I'm sure that was awkward, just having this camera in his face, just like, all right, next pick. Like, oh, okay. For the next pick. And, just doing that repetitively, especially since he had to do it for 2 days. I mean, at least he's in the comfort of his own home. That's one thing you can say about just the production for every team and every player and every coach. At least they're in their house. So it's not like you're in this outside environment trying to do it. It's like, well, I'm in the comfort of my own home doing this. But that could add some awkwardness to it because it is in your house. So I think Roger Goodell was just, I think it was the best they could do. I think obviously when he got comfortable, he started sitting down in the chair. Obviously that showed more of an authenticness, because it's like, I'm like, why don't you just sit down and do the picks? Does it really matter if you're standing up? I guess because of the TV, but and I'm trying to figure out how they even got the fans on there. So I think overall it was, like I said, it was fine for what it was. And I mean, that's basically what I think about it. What about you, Ethan?
I think the overall production side was fairly decent. I didn't really know what to walk in and expect, but I'm glad it was not it looked like a television broadcast, when I think a lot of people were worried that it would look more like if everybody's on a Zoom call, which is not. But from the most part, when they start, I like when they cut to the coaches and GMs and such. Like when they showcased Jerry in the I guess I don't know where Jerry was. Like
they said he was on his yacht.
Yeah, like wow.
Yeah,
he looked like he was in a spaceship or something. Well, let me say this: Jerry Jones is looking old, man, and maybe it's because when he gets shown, maybe he has makeup on for the most part, but he looked like he's been going through it. He looked like he's getting up there, man. He's been up there for a long time, so
yeah, Dak out here stressing him out, man.
he looked a little bit tired on that broadcast. And I thought the draft would go. It definitely went faster in the second day, of course, but it always does. But I don't know why they needed 9 minutes to make a pick
In the first round?
Yeah, that's insane. It took so long for the first round to end.
Yeah, because it's only one round, but it takes like 3.5 hours, and it's just like, why?
It was 12 o'clock by the time the first round finished, and it started at 8. So it's just, I still don't understand why the draft takes so long.
I honestly sometimes wonder if it's because they want to give more anticipation to the picks because they're first round picks and give more time for trades and et cetera, and they just want to give all that time. Plus, obviously since they're going really in depth with the players, every player that gets drafted in the first round, they got to give time to do their story and just. I wonder if all of that makes it so long because they feel like they got to fit so much in that time.
Maybe,
so they need more time.
Maybe it is for the betterment of the production value of the spectacle, the draft. But also, I don't know, because they always report who gets picked or who's going where and when. Like on Twitter, Twitter finds out who gets drafted maybe 20 seconds or a minute before everybody else, before it gets announced on TV. So maybe it's just a delay. I don't know.
I mean, some writers have access to the picks before they actually announce it. Because I've noticed, I saw some writers saying we can tip picks if y'all want. So I guess they have access to it. Just their, I guess, sources within the teams. Where us, obviously, it's like we won't know till literally they say it on TV.
Right.
Now, one question: What did you think of Cliff Kingsbury's house? His view, his patio.
It looks like I've been watching this show called Ozark on Netflix. Mm-hmm. It looks like he does money laundering. And he lives in a fancy estate. It does not look like. I mean, it looks like he coaches, but it's just it's a nice little. It's very minimalist. It's very 2020. As you know, he's a younger coach, so maybe he just has good interior design taste. I like the house. I just thought it was cool. Everybody else is in the kitchen. Like Bill Belichick it looked like he was in the kitchen.
Oh yeah, remember the dog was in his seat.
Yeah, then
and he was just there. Like, did he make the pick?
Everybody looks like they're in a crammed up office, and then Cliff Kingsbury is just sitting literally like a king in the middle of the. They got
the camera facing outside, so you can just see the scenery. Like, dang.
Yeah, he was definitely flexing on us. He was flexing on his retail skills, buying houses. So I liked it. It was pretty cool. I thought a lot of coaches where they were at were really interesting. Some were in their home office. They have a home office and stuff. Remember they showed the new Cleveland guy, the new Cleveland GM? It was very funny. I also thought, now, a lot of folks are giving some of the players some slack on Twitter and on social media about the way their houses looked. There's just no way that these aren't, people think that those are actually probably their houses. Some of them are, but there's just, you can tell when something's an Airbnb, right? I'm not crazy, right? These had to be Airbnb. There's no family photos. There's no nothing. It's just balloons in a box of pizza. This is the Airbnb.
Do you think maybe the parents were like, listen, we gotta take everything down. We can't have stuff out there.
No, anybody not doing that for the draft. What are you hiding your family photos for? They were in a room, had potpourri everywhere. I'm like, all right, this is an Airbnb. It's too clean. There's only 3 boxes of pizza, no plates. I'll tell you who was who was real. I forgot who it was. I think it was Michael Pittman, maybe. I don't know. But it showed where they were. They were in the living room. Everybody old. There's a ice chest, or there was a cooler in the back. It looked like a real house. Some of these dudes, like what was it? Who got all up in trouble? CeeDee Lamb? Airbnb, bro. Airbnb, bro.
You really think that was an Airbnb?
Yes. Go back and look at the footage and tell me that looks like a house that's been lived in, man. That's an Airbnb. Everybody in those first rounds that look like everybody is like everybody was not dressed up at the house, bro. I just know they weren't.
What was his name? Henry Ruggs. Remember, he had the robe on, the Old Spice robe on when he got drafted.
Right. Some people were in their home theater rooms, which makes sense, and then all this other stuff. But nah, man, some of those were Airbnbs, and I know for sure. I've looked at them too much. You just know what they look like. But
all right.
Let's take a break, and we're getting to the good drafts.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Okay, Brice, we're heading in. There's been 7 rounds worth of the draft, so we know who has picked who has had a good draft. Who do you feel like came out on top? I think I have a few names or a few teams who did I think a really, really good job this year and have a lot of tools and a lot of young guys that can really help them win now. Supposedly, a lot of guys who can be plug and play. So I guess I'll start off first. I think it's really tough to say, but I think the Colts had the best draft this year, personally. From just where they got in the first 3 rounds, I think the Colts really did a great job. So they got Michael Pittman. They get Jonathan Taylor. They get, what was it, a defensive back? I got to look it up real quick. Well, while I'm doing that, let me just continue on. Their draft makes sense because their team is not as bad. They're not in a really, really tough situation. They're not rebuilding. They have an old guy on their roster, right? They went and got, which I'm a fan of, they went and got Jacob Eason, which makes all the sense in the world to me. Either Jacob Eason needed to go to two places to me, the Steelers or somewhere like the Colts, where he doesn't have to initially be thrown in to start. He can learn. He can be groomed into a system. And it makes sense. Jacob Eason is not the best prospect in the quarterback room, but he has talent. He has promise. And under a certain amount of development, we don't know what we'll get. We saw the best of Jacoby Brissett on the Colts. I don't know what we're going to see exactly from the likes of Phillip Rivers after what we saw last year, but I have to expect that Phillip Rivers is going to be sharper than he was last season, right? It looked like there was a lot of distractions, a lot of weird things were going on in L.A., in the Chargers locker room or just in the media perspective. It just didn't look the same as it used to be, and maybe it's because ever since they moved from San Diego, things have looked a little bit strange for them, except for their uniforms. The uniforms are pretty fire now. But this is about the Colts. The Colts have set themselves up for the future. They don't have to stress about finding their next guy, and maybe he isn't their next guy, but they didn't draft as if they're in a bind. They have a really, really good complete team around them already. They had a really good record in the beginning of the year last year until injuries derailed them. So now they have depth at the wide receiver position. They already had a stud running back, in my opinion, in Marlon Mack. So the fantasy guys are crying right now because everybody's running the ball by committee now. So they draft Jonathan Taylor, who behind that offensive line, which is probably the best in football, is going to be crazy. So, yeah.
That makes sense. All right. Well, a team that I think had an excellent draft as well are the and it sucks to say this, but the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to me had a pretty great draft to me. They were able to trade up and get one of the best tackles, one of the tier 1 tackles in this draft to protect Tom Brady's right side. So they were able to fortify the offensive line. They were able to pick up the son of Antoine Winfield Jr. to help man the secondary. Obviously, they're an up-and-coming secondary. Secondary has been an issue for Tampa Bay for the last several years. So being able to get a player of that caliber as he dropped to that part in the second round was really effective for them to get their defense established. Also getting a guy like Keyshawn Vaughn from Vanderbilt. Not a lot of people talk about Keyshawn Vaughn coming into the draft. But one thing Tom Brady's always had is that he's always had that running back who he can slip out of the backfield like a James White and Deion Lewis and be able to make plays that way. And I think that's what Keyshawn Vaughn can be for them. So obviously, again, they're also starting over a little bit at the running back position. So obviously that's something too. And so I think that's a good move. And then, just for the rest of the draft, you got another receiver and really just getting with the picks they have. They just got who they needed to get to when you're a team that you feel like you're close to making a big run in the playoffs, Super Bowl run. Usually your rosters are pretty put together. So you're just making these selections to solidify or fortify or improve a spot that maybe was a weakness for you last year. And I feel like Tampa Bay attacked all those areas. So it definitely makes them more of a dangerous team, in my opinion. And it just feels like all Tampa Bay keeps doing this entire offseason is getting better and better and upgrading, which definitely makes them very, a team definitely watch out for this year when the NFL season comes around.
Right. I'm going to go another SEC. Another NFC South team. Man, the Panthers really cleaned up, in my opinion. I think the Panthers did a really good job. They focused on what they felt, what they needed, and it was all defense. So, first round, Derrick Brown, defensive tackle, Auburn, one of the scariest guys in the draft, in my opinion, as far as just pure raw talent. That guy is really, really, really crazy, in my opinion. Him and Shaq Thompson, crazy. It's going to be wild. So then they get Gross Matos for Penn State, defensive end, Jeremy Chin, safety, Troy Pride Jr., cornerback, Kenny Robinson, safety, Bravian Roy, defensive tackle, Stanley Thomas Oliver III, what a name, cornerback. All 7 rounds. Well, they didn't have a 3rd round pick. So all their picks, defensive players. And it makes sense because the Panthers defense has lost some key players. And not only that, their secondary has been probably one of the worst in I almost said SEC again. One of the worst in the NFC South, year in and year out. And you got to think about this now. The NFC South is about to be a onslaught of offensive potential. So I would never want to be a cornerback in the NFC South if I didn't think I had it, because you're defending so many good players, right? You got to be matched up against the Julios, the Calvin Ridleys, the Michael Thomases, the Emmanuel Sanders. Now it's getting crazy. Now you have to deal with Tom Brady throwing the ball more accurately to Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, and now Rob Gronkowski. Come on, man. You don't want to play. You got to have a defense that can hold up to that, right? You got to be able to do that. So they went all in on defense, and I thought that was a pretty bold tactic, if I do say so myself. Pretty bold.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll have to see what happens in Tampa Bay also with O.J. Howard. It looks like he is staying right now, so we'll have to see how that works out. But another team that I also think had another great draft, in my opinion, was also the Miami Dolphins, in my opinion, had a very great draft for what they needed, what they were trying to do with their team.
They were the next on my list, yeah.
Because obviously they got the quarterback they wanted. They believe in him, and you know what they did? As soon as they drafted him, I believe they selected 3 offensive linemen in this draft. Because obviously they're trying to fortify the offensive line to protect him. Obviously, Miami's offensive line was the worst in the NFL last year, so they had to fortify that. They also improved their secondary tremendously. Obviously, Miami probably has, and arguably, the 2 best corners in the NFL, with Xavier Howard and Byron Jones. Obviously, they have the highest paid corners in the league. And then adding, more secondary help. So, with Brian Flores trying to bring that New England defense, that versatile defense there, they're obviously going to be expecting to be in low-scoring games, I'm assuming, with the picks they've also made, but also being able to run the football. They were actually also able to trade one of the draft picks to get running back Matt Breida from the 49ers. I think that's a part – you can put that a part of their draft class too. Obviously, if you remember seeing Matt Breida in San Francisco last year, he's a very explosive running back. And, it definitely Miami's one of those teams you don't know how good they're going to be this year. And they can range from being a surprise team that makes it they could be this year's Tennessee maybe, or they may just be mediocre. But they really made selections that I think they needed to make to help improve, the positions of need on their team, and also being able to pick up late value, like late in the 6th, they were able to get a outside linebacker guy from Boise State. I believe his name is Curtis Weaver. Guy who actually was projected to go into day 2, but somehow got to the 6th round. So, it'll be interesting to see what happens when all these guys get onto the field. Because I believe they drafted 12 rookies or 13 rookies this year. So obviously that's a big rookie class that you're bringing in, plus the undrafted guys. So that's another team that I think actually had an absolutely great draft when it came to their future and improving now with Brian Flores as the head coach leading the charge.
Right. So, coming up after this break, we're going to talk about not so good drafts and why that is the case.
I want to talk to you guys about this amazing product I've been using lately called Hydrant. If you're like me and you want to kick the coffee habit, but you're worried about your energy levels depleting, to avoid the morning sluggishness and that midday slump, you need to make sure you're hydrated. It's super important. And that's where I've been using Hydrant. And for 25% off your first order, you can go to drinkhydrant.com and enter promo code GSMC at checkout. Hydrant is basically flavored electrolyte packets you mix directly into your water to make hydrating your body easy and delicious. And what I love about Hydrant, it's backed by research. The formula was developed by Oxford scientists to provide perfectly balanced, efficient hydration. Again, that's drinkhydrant.com and enter promo code GSMC for 25% off your first order. Another really cool thing about Hydrant, there's no synthetic colors or artificial sweeteners. The formula is vegan and you can choose between 3 different flavors or a variety pack. So for all my vegan friendly fellows out there, this one's for you. Again, this is drinkhydrant.com and enter promo code GSMC.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Okay, so we just recently talked about who we thought had a good draft, and now who do we think didn't have the best draft in the world? So where do we think that takes us? Who's the first team in your mind where you thought, okay, this draft wasn't really that great?
I know they addressed some needs they needed to address, but I'm gonna have to go with the Eagles here.
Okay.
Because I just feel like I think the biggest reason is just the whole Jalen Hurts selection to me, because that's obviously one of the more head scratching selections of the weekend, because of the fact that you have a guy, Carson Wentz, in his 20s. You say he's your franchise quarterback. You just gave him an extension. And then you drafted a guy like Jalen Hurts, who people projected as a guy you could sit behind for maybe a year or two, develop, and potentially become a starting quarterback, potentially in the NFL. And if you're putting him in a situation with Carson Wentz, I mean, is he even going to really hit the field? I mean, yeah, Carson Wentz gets hurt, but what if he stays healthy? Like, is he even going to be able to touch the field? Like, is he going to be able to show anything while he's there? And I know the Eagles GM came out saying, well, we believe we're a quarterback factory. We want to develop quarterbacks. But it's just like, you had other needs. And then you go get a quarterback that you don't need. And I guess you can look at it the other way and think, oh, well, if Carson gets hurt again and Jalen Hurts comes in there and balls out, well, that's going to maybe put them in like a Teddy Bridgewater type situation. And now teams are going to potentially, want to trade for him, which, I mean, that's obviously the potential of it. But I just feel like, they added 3 wide receivers. That was obviously a big need. But I feel like outside of that, they were kind of a little bit all over the place. I feel like they were just drafting at certain positions, because you really don't know how many people are going to actually contribute to this year's team. Because I feel like the Eagles are looking at this year being a win-now situation. Obviously, like I said, Jalen Reagor and they also traded for Marquise Goodwin. I think they're going to be effective and start off and help, but we'll have to see how the rest of this draft class actually helps the Philadelphia Eagles for years to come, in my opinion.
Yeah, I thought the second round edition of Jalen Hurts was interesting. First, it hurt me as a man because I really wanted the Saints to do it. I wanted the Saints to be the ones to be like, why did you do that? Why would you get Jalen? What about Taysom Hill and all this stuff? And that was, it was taken right from us, but it's okay because I wanted to see my man Jalen get drafted. Now the Eagles was just not the place I ever expected him to go to, ever. Did not see that one coming. And to be completely honest, it's so weird for me to I don't even know what to say about it. It's almost as perplexing as the Packers situation. Almost. Because Aaron Rodgers has been hurt over his career, but not to the extent that Carson Wentz has been for the Eagles and in big time moments. Now, I'm not saying that injuries should mean that he can't perform in big time moments. I believe he can. I just feel like they realize that, Carson Wentz has not been able to prove at this moment in time, even if some of the stuff has been fluky, like the concussion was pretty fluky and wasn't his fault. Any injury isn't somebody's fault per se. But you know what I'm trying to say. Like, you haven't been able to stay healthy. And you are an investment on our franchise. And they're making precautions on their investment, right? If Carson Wentz is not ready to go, their team is still good enough to go some places. They need somebody to have just in case something goes wrong with Carson. And I guess they decided to look at the statistics, the tape, whatever it took to draft Jalen Hurts and say this is the guy for when Carson is not our guy. And I think that's why they made that pick. Second round, though, I'm not too sure why. And I think they could have gotten a whole lot more from just that whole side of the ball. Maybe, another cornerback or something. I don't know. But, yeah, man, the Eagles draft was a bit strange. I don't want to talk too much about Green Bay just yet because I think we have to hold on to that. That might be its own thing. So, but let's just say Green Bay had a very strange draft, and I don't think anybody really agrees with what they've done what they did in the first 3 rounds. One that I'm thinking that might end up not being so well, but it's really not a bad draft, but it's not a good one, primarily because of what they did with their first round pick. I think you know who I'm talking about. Do you know who I'm talking about, Brice?
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
All right, so they could have got him in another round, man. They didn't have to do that. They as in the Falcons. So the Falcons draft AJ Terrell with their first round pick, number 16. I'm looking at everybody else that had went after him, and I'm not seeing anything that, like, for one thing, he's not as bad as people think. I like the tape that gets thrown around, or the video of him getting beat down, getting burnt by LSU and by Ohio State or whatever the case may be. That's not indicative of his whole career. He's been really good. Of course, they didn't show what he did when they won the national championship like a year ago. And things like that. So people were picking and choosing because they didn't enjoy the pick. And that's typically what sports fans do anyway. But I will say, scouts still think that he could have been there for later rounds. He didn't have to go right there. And I don't think anybody has really had them in their first round radar. How do you feel as a fan? Because I like most of your other picks. I think Marlon Davidson sounds like a scary man. I want no part of him at all.
Yeah. See, the thing is, the consensus of what I'm hearing is the biggest issue with the cornerbacks of this draft is there wasn't a definitive third corner, so no one knew who the third corner was definitively. So I guess that would depend just on the team and who they thought was the best third corner in this draft. But I also feel like a reason why the Falcons selected him is you have to understand something too. They only had 6 picks. So it's not like, we have like 2 in the second round. We could just do some a little later. We'll get them later. I felt like in a way when you have a very limited amount of draft selections, you sometimes have to reach if you need a position because it's not like you have all this ammo later. And if they traded up or traded down, if they trade down, it gives them picks. That's why I think everybody wanted them to trade down. But I feel like they just took who they felt like fit their system the best. And like when I was reading all the scouts' report on him, they're saying like, well, he has the ability to replace Desmond Trufant, and he can be that guy. I just think again, people just don't like where he was selected. I always feel like with draft picks too, it's easy to say he shouldn't have been selected that high, but if he ends up being a starting corner for 12 years for us, I mean, you're not going to complain. It's just we always think about value because draft is almost like a money ball type of thing. You're taking where the value is best needed. And so I can understand why people were up in arms. To me, I'm just like, listen, the LSU tape, listen. They literally said it even on the broadcast that that the LSU wide receiver is really making every corner look bad. So I don't look at that as an indictment on him. Like, I mean, you saw that passing offense. I mean, they put up 50 points. Clemson left 50 points to them. And we look at Clemson as one of the best defenses in the country. So I don't look at that as an indictment on him. I just think that, obviously there's some things that you can work with there. There's some skills there. We have a very young secondary now, and we're just gonna have to see what happens, man. It's like I said, this is do or die here for Dan Quinn. This is it right here. He's putting all his marbles on the table, and he's either going out swinging with this man or not. So I think that's just what I think about it in retrospect. I'm fine with the selection. I just, it's just like, listen, honestly, if he can play, then I can't complain. So,
yeah, and I think he can play at this level. I just think that you guys could have gotten more you guys could have traded down, because I know you guys wanted to trade up. There's rumors that a lot of teams were trying to trade up, and maybe they were trying to
sell the entire draft for Chase Young.
I thought you guys would go for Akuda, personally. That's what I was thinking, if you guys were going to try and trade up, because Detroit was the one that was looking to sell, but they didn't have the price figure that they want, so they didn't end up selling, and they ended up staying, and they got Akuda. So I think that was probably what the Falcons were looking at, as far as they need a guy who can be their prime time corner for the foreseeable future, and they don't have that right now, and their secondary is kind of in flux due to the fact that they don't know what they're going to get from Keanu Neal after having his second season-ending injury in 3 years or so. So they need somebody in the secondary that they can depend on, and they haven't had that for quite some time. But let's take a break, and we're going to get into our...
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Okay, Brice, the floor is yours. Give me your first surprise that happened during this draft.
Well, I wouldn't say necessarily surprised in terms of just the quality of player, but I am surprised by the player they took when they had other quality or potentially better quality players on the board. And I think that was the New York Giants taking Andrew Thomas at 4. I think a lot of people figured they were going to take Isaiah Simmons and they were going to take a tackle. And I was just, but everybody had kind of idea who were the top tackles in the draft. Obviously, Warfs from Iowa, who the Buccaneers drafted, and other guys, like Becton, he was another guy. And I kind of look at them taking him that early, and I was just like, I mean, yeah, he's a top tackle, but at 4 though, like I wasn't sure. Like, okay, I mean, listen, if he ends up being fine, it works out for you. But it was just kind of like, did y'all really view him as the best tackle on the board at that spot? I mean, I can't, debate whatever their scouting department told him. Maybe there's something they saw in him that they didn't see in the other guys. I just also got a feel from New York Giants fans. They were kind of like, okay, yeah, we got a tackle, but him? Like, I guess if that's what you want to do. So I feel like that was definitely a bit of a surprise to me. I was not expecting him to go to that spot in the first round, that high up. I was expecting him to maybe be like top 10, like lower 10 or like 11, 12. I wasn't expecting him to go as high as he did in the draft.
Yeah, I have a friend who's a Giants fan. He was saying that, Andrew Thomas was somebody who they felt they were going to get, but he wanted them to trade down to like maybe around like to selection 12 and get him and maybe get a pick back in the third round or something like that. But they ended up taking him 4th overall, which tells me either A, they couldn't trade down and they didn't want to take Simmons with the 4th pick, which is weird to me. Which another thing, this little bit of I guess it segues into what I was going to say, is that Simmons falling all the way to Arizona, that was very surprising to me. And maybe it's because of what everybody else needed at the time. And everybody was very, very, very content with the idea that he was going to the Giants and be the 4th overall selection. And when he didn't, I was just like, okay, so how far is he going to fall? And when you think about it, Miami was at 5 and the Chargers were the 7th pick. So it was up to who was at 6, who escapes me at the moment. Do you remember who was at the 6th overall pick?
The Chargers were actually the 6th pick.
They were the 6th pick? Yeah.
Yeah, they came right after Miami.
Right. Okay, so it was them, Miami. Then who was the 7th?
I haven't.
I think
was it? No, it wasn't. It was the Jacksonville.
Wow. I can't really let me, regardless, he was the 8th pick.
Yes, it was Jacksonville.
It was Jacksonville?
No, it wasn't. My bad.
Who was?
Yeah. I'm trying to see who the 7th pick is. I'm weak on who the 7th pick is.
Yeah. Well, 8th pick, Isaiah Simmons, very surprising to me because as we can't remember who the 7th pick in the draft was, clearly they didn't feel like they needed to fill that position. Oh, wow. I just remembered. It was Carolina. That's why it's tripping me out. Anyway, Carolina was the 7th pick in the draft. And
yeah, okay.
They passed on Simmons and they got Derek Brown, which is a really good pick. I think either way, if the Arizona Cardinals were 7th and they picked Derek Brown, I'm pretty sure that the Carolina Panthers would have still picked another defensive player. So it probably would have been Isaiah Simmons. Why? So maybe Derek Brown was just probably on everybody's radar a little bit higher than Isaiah Simmons was. just because everybody thought that Isaiah Simmons was going to be gone anyway. I don't know.
Well, I also heard that one reason why they didn't know where he was going is because, like, you know how Isaiah Simmons is kind of listed as like a positionless guy. Even though he says linebacker, he can play safety, nickel, linebacker, defensive end. They were talking about that might have hurt his stock because it depends on how a team viewed him. Some teams viewed him as a safety, which usually you don't see safeties going in the top 10. Some viewed him as, you know, maybe a nickel. So maybe that was reason why some teams also was just like, well, yeah, he's versatile, but we maybe have more of a distinct need in a certain spot, so he wouldn't necessarily work for us at this moment.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Real quickly, I'm going to just go ahead and say Jalen Hurts was probably at the second round and being the next quarterback off the board was a little bit surprising to me. I would assume that someone of the likes of Jacob Eason would go before him, and that, or actually I thought Fromm would go first and Jacob Eason would go last in that top 6 of quarterbacks, and we'd see Jalen Hurts somewhere in the middle between those two. And to see him go to the Eagles is still just very shocking to me. And in the second round, nonetheless, I thought all those guys would start going in the third round or later. But the second round was just very, very, looked like a reach, to be honest, if anything. It felt like a reach. It didn't feel like a smart reach either, I suppose. And as we are about to start segueing into it, I guess we have to talk about the Green Bay Packers anyway. So Green Bay made the surprise draft pick in the first round in a long time, because they wouldn't take Jordan Love. And man, the firestorm that Twitter got into because they took Jordan Love, and everybody's just like, why would you do that? Why would you do that? Why would you do that? Like, everybody's just like, oh, I feel so bad for Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers still has no help. 15 years he's been playing with not a first round pick that has been a wide receiver / or running back, and it was looking bad for everybody involved. And you know what was icing on the cake was the guy that supposedly people say Aaron Rodgers ran out of town, drafted a wide receiver in the first round at his first new job with the Dallas Cowboys, and probably got the best wide receiver in the draft. So that's just irony in a nutshell right there.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. It's very surprising, very shocking, I think, to see that pick being made. And the craziest thing is, Ethan, they didn't even select the wide receiver the entire draft. That was the worst thing. I think a lot of people felt some type of way about this. I don't know what Green Bay's plan is at the wide receiver position, but it shouldn't be, let's just run Devontae Adams into the ground, and then whoever else can figure it out, you know, they'll get good. You know, you're Aaron Rodgers. But it's weird because Aaron Rodgers, although he's not getting any younger, if Tom Brady's still playing, right? Tom is still in the league. Drew Brees is still in the league. Ben Roethlisberger, who has essentially keeps dying and rising from the dead, still in the league. Phillip Rivers, who had the worst season I've seen from an old guy, decides to come back. Aaron Rodgers can still play at a high level. Granted, it was in a different way than we've ever seen Aaron Rodgers play last year, but they still were one game away from the Super Bowl. Did they deserve to be there? Do you feel like they earned, like they were maybe overhyped and they got that seeding of the second seed only because of circumstantial records? Sure. But they were still talented enough to get there. They still had the squadron enough to make it suit fit. They just needed some more weapons. They lost Jimmy Graham. They don't have Randall Cobb anymore. Well, they haven't had him for a few years. They just have Devontae Adams. And they lost Geronimo Allison, too.
Right, and he's nothing to really write home about. What were you going to do? But let's go ahead and say
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Okay, Brice, tell me. When you make one of the more controversial picks, if not the most controversial pick, in the first round, it's day 2. Everyone's been talking about, why didn't you draft a wide receiver for Aaron Rodgers? Why didn't you draft somebody to come catch the football from Aaron Rodgers? So, you hear this all day. All for the next 24-hour cycle. The news, everybody's just like, man, feel bad for A-Rod. A-Rod has no help. You would think that, oh, maybe I should get him some help. What do they do at the second round, Brice?
Well, what they don't do is get a wide receiver. They actually end up getting other positions that are not as needed.
They got a running back, Brice. They got a running back. A team that had Aaron Jones' best season. A complete stud last season. Not to mention, their backup in that position is also really good. And now they get another one. Another running back. Another running back, Brice. Another one.
It's like they basically just said, screw the biggest need. We're just going to draft who we want. And if I'm Aaron Rodgers, and people have been saying this, listen, if Green Bay does not have a good year this year, Aaron Rodgers is going to think about this. And do not be surprised if he might think about asking for a trade. Because he probably feels extremely disrespected right now. And remember, after they made the Jordan Love trade too, remember, the GM said he ain't even talked to Aaron yet. So Aaron was completely probably blindsided like the rest of us. He's thinking, oh, we're going to get a wide receiver. We're going to be somebody I can work with. Next thing you know, Jordan Love. What? And then second day comes. All right, okay, if they get me wide receivers today, it'll be fine. You know who they get? A.J. Dillon.
Right.
What?
I mean,
wait, what are we doing here?
I mean, there wasn't any super, like, supremely. It's not even the fact that their second round pick, in theory, is so horrible, because it wasn't like there are wide receivers that maybe a lot of people had on their radar personally anyway out there. But let's keep in mind that they had the 26th overall pick in the first round. T. Higgins went in the second round, the first pick. The next pick was Michael Pittman. You had your chance. You had the chance to make this right. And you chose to not do it. That's my issue. You chose wrong.
What also makes it worse is that what everybody says is the fact they traded up for Jordan Love.
This is even worse.
It's like, why are you so desperate to get him? Like, what are you trying to do?
This is even worse. You were at a prime position that no one would complain if T. Higgins would have went late first round, or Michael Pittman late first round. This is the one. Now, granted, they got some offensive linemen. They got an O lineman from Michigan who got a B- rating as far as the draft grade, and then they got Jake Hansen from Oregon, and then Simon Stepanek from Indiana. Those are 3 straight offensive linemen in the 6th round. Now, we don't know. I think maybe the guy from Michigan is probably going to be somebody that you really need to pay attention to. And they got an edge rusher from Miami, Jonathan Garvin, who I think a lot of people thought he would go a little bit earlier in the draft. And, all in all, the draft isn't completely horrible, but their first 3 picks, pretty bad. I gotta say.
Yeah. And I think also the message that they're sending to Aaron is that we're not going to win this year. And they're blatantly saying that. Because we have seen with that receiving core, yeah, he could win you some games. He may be able to get you to the playoffs. But in terms of the success that y'all want, it's not going to happen. Because Aaron is 36. He's even said it himself. Listen, I'm entering the back nine of my career. I'm trying to win now. And this draft is that has nothing to do, like, for him, he probably feels like, how are we winning now with these picks? Like, we're just going to run everybody to death. We're just going to run it down their throats and get over 150 yards a game. I mean, if we're able to do that, fantastic. But what if we go against a team like the 49ers who has a better roster than us, and the defensive line has dominated me for the last 2 games, and we've been blown out the last 2 times? How are these picks going to help us beat them? You know what I'm saying? So it's just one of those things where, listen, I'm sure they might have signed some undrafted wide receiver. I don't know what they're expecting, whatever him to do, but it's just one of those things where I feel like I said, every Green Bay fan scratching their head. It's just like, so are we trying to win now, or what are we doing? And then this does, even though the head coach said this doesn't put a clock on Aaron Rodgers, it kind of does put a clock on Aaron Rodgers. Because, I mean, again, you're obviously expecting Jordan Love to be the quarterback of the future. Rodgers says he wants to play until he's 40. That's at least another 4 years. So, like, what are we doing here? Like, you have to eventually let Jordan Love play to see if he's going to be the guy. So, does that mean Aaron Rodgers' Green Bay career could be coming to a soon for the next couple of years?
Right. And if, like, no one wants to see their replacement, right? No one wants to see that. And then they're going to ask Aaron Rodgers to groom this young man? Okay. What happened? What happened with Aaron Rodgers and Brett Favre? How did that go?
Did he want to groom him? He was just like, you do whatever you want to do.
Right. And I think there's got to be a level of respect to that. Like, I didn't want you here. Like, sure, you're a young kid, and I don't think you'll be mean to him, but at the end of the day, there's gonna be some hostility in that locker room and in that coach and like within the coaching staff and all this. Like, Aaron Rodgers is not an easy guy to coach because he's a football genius essentially. So he's somebody who is not easily coached, and he's always challenging stuff. And then you come and draft his replacement, not in the 3rd round, not in the 4th round, not in the 5th round, in the 1st round where you traded up to go get Jordan Love, who probably won't see the field for another 3 years at least. What is the point? You could have waited. We don't even know if Jordan Love is really this good prospect. Everybody keeps saying that, oh man, he's a Patrick Mahomes-esque type of guy, and Patrick Mahomes' arm talent is unreal, right? Coming out of Texas Tech, it's not even on the same plateau. It's not even the same plateau. It's definitely putting a clock on Rodgers because there's just no way they're gonna know. Like, this isn't like Bill Belichick drafting a quarterback in the 5th round that no one really knows about, and then they just sit and wait on it for years and years. Like, Brady didn't want, even Tom Brady, as great as he is, did not like the fact that it looked like they were waiting for Tom to retire so they can go ahead and start Jimmy Garoppolo. And it shows in many clips. He does not look to like Jimmy Garoppolo very much. He doesn't like to get close with him because he knew he was the replacement.
You read that story when a couple of years ago when all this Patriot dissension started coming out about the TB12 clinic they had there and how Jimmy G tried to go to it and for some reason he couldn't get into it. And they were talking about was that because they didn't want to give him the same treatments that other players were using because of the fact that you're the guy who they're trying to replace me with. Why would I help you? So, we've seen these relationships can be very iffy. when a quarterback feels like you're basically saying, "Oh, you think I'm done? You're just going to get my replacement." Okay, I see how it is.
Right. Even like on a smaller level, you see Josh. They put the clock on Josh Allen over there in Buffalo. They said we traded for a top flight wide receiver, gave up our first round pick. It's time to go. It's time to show us something instead of fumbling in the middle of a playoff game and throwing and having turnovers. So they went and got Jake Fromm, and albeit we don't know if Jake Fromm will be good or if Jake Fromm is good right now. There's questions coming into the draft. He was touted as the best quarterback like in the way beginning, and now he is not by a far margin, and here we are. They draft Jake Fromm, and now Josh Allen has a clock on his head. In similar fashion, Aaron Rodgers, even if the clock doesn't make sense, there's got to be some, maybe even he thinks there's a clock on his head. All it takes is one incident, one injury, one mistake, and you're going to see some Tony Romo, Dak problems in here. It's not going to be good. It's not going to be good. But let's go ahead and take our final break for the day, and we're going to get into some New Orleans Saints topics because they have been.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Okay, so the Saints had a very interesting draft. In my opinion, it may have been a little bit boring. They might win a little chalk, but it is what it is. So the Saints did not have a second-round pick. In the first round, they took offensive interior lineman from Michigan, one of the better offensive interior linemen, if not the best one in the draft. And his name is really actually unique, actually. He's a good... Cesar Ruiz was probably, I've read something like he called, for the last 2 years of his Michigan career, he called every offensive line play for the passing game and the running game, and he was 99% correct in those instances of where he was calling the shots. Granted, this comes out of Michigan, straight from a offensive line coach, I believe, or offensive coordinator, one of the two. And so it might be a bit biased, but at the same time, from tape and just what I've been hearing, he seems like a good guy, and the Saints definitely needed more offensive line help. Everybody who's just upset that we did not take Patrick Queen, or the fact that we didn't get a wide receiver or anything like that, you got to remember, we lost in the NFC playoffs because our offensive linemen got manhandled by Minnesota. They put edge rushers in the middle of the offense, and Drew Brees couldn't do anything. The offense couldn't do anything, and we ran out of town. So when we address it, all of a sudden it's a problem. All of a sudden we're making draft mistakes. The same guys who drafted Alvin Kamara in the third round, the same guys who drafted Michael Thomas in the second round, the same guys who drafted Ryan Ramczyk in the back half of the round and got probably one of the best linemen in the NFL, and he's still on his rookie deal. Come on, man. Get with the program. Trust the process, as Joel Embiid would tell people. Trust the process. Anyway, they don't have a second round pick. They go into the third round, and they end up drafting a quality wide receiver. I'm sorry, they draft a linebacker who looks to be really, really good coming out of, was it Iowa? Wisconsin, correct. So they draft a guy out of Wisconsin. He looks to be pretty good in Zach Braun. And a lot of people thought he was going to go second round but he ended up going to the third, and then the Saints trade up every remaining pick to go back into the third round and get a tight end, essentially, who played Division III ball.
Yes, sir. Division III in the building.
But he's not just a tight end. Apparently he played quarterback, so immediately everybody's thinking, oh man, they wouldn't drafted a Taysom Hill replacement for Taysom Hill. So now everybody's just wondering, okay, so Taysom Hill is going to be the quarterback for the future? Are we okay with this? Am I okay with this? I don't know. And then, of course, the Saints are never really done, even if they don't have any draft picks, because once the draft was over, they started signing undrafted free agents all over the place. So they got at least about 15 of them, or 15 guys. I saw the Falcons got 20 undrafted free agents. But within them, they also signed Jameis Winston to a one-year deal. So they have two guys who threw for 5,000 yards in the previous season on the same team. This has to be insurance. This has to be the insurance play. Now, I'm not too sure what this means per se for Taysom Hill, but it has to mean something of the sort of they still want to use Taysom Hill in a similar role that he was last year, maybe even more expanded. Drew Brees is not getting any younger. He has a 2-year deal behind him, but to be honest, it's probably more so a 1-year deal, and we'll see what happens. So if Drew Brees goes down again, or he's not playing well, or whatever the case may be, they need a guy that can come in and replace, because I don't think they believe Taysom is ready. And they just paid Taysom some big dollars for a backup quarterback again, just like they paid Teddy Bridgewater big dollars as a backup quarterback, because they expect that Taysom Hill projectively is the next starting quarterback for the New Orleans Saints for the future, even though he's almost 30 before this even starts. It's going to be interesting how this works out, because I don't know if we're going to see Jameis this year. I really hope we don't, because that would mean Drew Brees is playing well. But at the end of the day, this makes sense. You're not paying crazy amounts of money. Jameis gets to learn in one of the best offenses in football, one of the best offensive minds in football, and one of the Hall of Fame quarterbacks of all time. And what's more to like? I mean, I'm not a Jameis hater. I don't hate Jameis. I do think he has turnover issues, but I also think that you can't just mistake yourself into 5,000 yards passing and 30 touchdowns. So how do you feel about the idea that Jameis, or how should I feel about the idea that maybe Jameis Winston could end up being the starter next year? I don't know. It's going to be a conversation for sure. So, because a lot of people really think that this is Drew Brees' last year, and no one really thinks that the 2-year thing is real and it's all tentative money. What do you give me your quick thoughts on the Jameis signing?
I mean, I do agree it gives Jameis a chance to learn with Sean Payton, learn from Drew Brees. Help, because Drew Brees is one of the best protectors of the football in the league, and that's something that Jameis Winston has an issue with, protecting the football. So I think learning from Drew Brees and Sean Payton can definitely help him out and make him a better quarterback, you know? Now, I don't know what happened. If Drew Brees would happen to go down this year, I don't know how happy you would be, because if Jameis is still Jameis, I know you're going to have a very frustrating time with him. But this, like I said, I think everybody is looking at what happened with Teddy last year and said, listen, if he goes down and we have a quality guy behind us, we can still win games with this roster. And I think that only can help Jameis, and it can only help you guys. So I think that's the reason why they made this move, because it's weird to say, but they're basically trying to develop Jameis Winston, I think, into being more of a less turnover-prone quarterback, but still being able to make the big plays that he is able to make. Because like I said, it's a 1-year deal. So it's not like they're thinking, yeah, we want to keep you long-term, unless maybe that could be something that they fall in love with him during the season. It's like, you know what? I wanted Taysom Hill, but we might have to keep this Jameis man around. Drew Brees kicks the bucket. So
Oh,
I don't know how you feel about that. I don't know if you'd be happy about that, but I mean, you gotta think about it.
We signed a guy for 1 year to be his football therapist. I don't know, man. It's hard to really it's really tough to put into words.
Unless y'all gonna give up the whole draft class and trade up for Trevor Lawrence next year.
No, I don't think anybody would take that deal because whoever needs Trevor Lawrence is going to need Trevor Lawrence. So I don't think anybody's trading out of Trevor Lawrence if they need a guy like him. So unless we somehow are so bad that we just decide to tank and then go get him, sure. But I don't know. I think there'll be plenty of options. I think I don't know if Sean Payton is really interested in developing a younger guy because they don't really they've had the Saints over the years, right? The backups that they've acquired for the Saints have not really changed much. They had Chase Daniel for a number of years, and then they'd bring in guys that are not really great. So they had, funny enough, they ended up having who was it? Cardell Jones for a season, not even the whole season. They had him in there. Of course, I believe did the Saints? I feel like the Saints had Robert Griffin at a certain point, and then he went somewhere else. They brought in Teddy Bridgewater, was a success, but I don't believe Teddy Bridgewater should have been a backup quarterback this entire time. And he was only a backup quarterback just because of his injury history and where Minnesota just decided to move on. Mm-hmm. But it's not like the Saints come in and draft guys expecting, they've been riding the Drew Brees wave for a very long time. And similar to what the Patriots have done, they just kind of keep guys in-house for a long time because they have rapport, they know the system, and they don't have to potentially start training somebody new. And they're not in that mindset mode. They're in win championship now mode. It's not, let's start rebuilding the youth. We're getting guys that can get out there and play now. So once again, here we see the Saints not really, they did draft a quarterback, or they picked up a quarterback in undrafted free agency out of Michigan or out of Mississippi State, who, by all accounts from what I hear, is not a really, really good guy for quarterback, but they made him send tape of running routes. So I kind of figure where this is going once again. We just keep getting Taysom Hill clones, and Sean Payton is slowly becoming a mad genius. I don't know what's going on. He's a mad scientist.
Next year, man, it may be the battle. Who will be your quarterback, Jameis Winston or Taysom Hill? I don't know if that excites you or scares you. So
it does both. It does both. But with that said, this will be the finale of the GSMC football podcast for today. I'd like to thank you all for listening. Don't forget to rate and review the podcast, and wherever you listen to, please 5 stars, and share it with your friends. Don't forget to keep staying safe, washing your hands, wear a mask if you go out, and practice social distancing. Any last words, Mr. Brice?
Nothing much, man. Just stay safe out there. Hopefully sports will be back up and running soon.
Right. I believe in sports. Let's do it. For Brice and Ethan for GSMC Football Podcast.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.